Hi, everybody. I'm Victoria Main. I'm CEO at Brussels Advocacy and Communications Consultancy, Combra Associates. And we're really excited to be hosting this timely discussion with PAR on the European Commission's white paper on foreign subsidies. All the more excited because we have as a speaker Eddie de Schmitter, who actually drafted the white paper. So we'll actually have the horse's mouth on tap. Eddie is head of the International Relations Unit at the Commission's DG Competition. Here to bring a real-world perspective is Francois Denard, who heads the Greater China Antitrust practice at Allen & Overy. He's been doing so for more than a decade, and for 20 years or so has been advising EU and Asian clients. So if anybody's qualified to bring a reality check on this initiative, it's Francois. We also have Claire Harris, who's Senior Advisor at Combra. Claire will be bringing insights as a seasoned competition practitioner with international experience spanning at least 20 years. And finally, as moderator, we have Jeremy Fleming-Jones, who's Editor and Bureau Chief at PAR. Jeremy's been following these issues for ages as well. He has the challenging task of limiting what will be a fascinating debate to just 45 minutes. There are bound to be invaluable insights for anybody working at the intersection of competition and trade. Before I hand over to Jeremy, I urge you to put your questions in the Q&A chat for Claire to be feeding them in during the debate. And we'll also be following up with you to answer questions, or our speakers will be following up to answer any questions that don't make it into the debate. Feel free also to tweet away during the debate. So, Jeremy, without any further ado, over to you.
Thanks very much, Victoria. And yes, as you said, so we're discussing today the white paper which was published by the Commission about the 17th of last month. So we're almost a month in now. And the white paper makes some general proposals for the scrutiny of foreign subsidies in the EU. And the three kind of key proposals are modules dealing with an ex post tool, an ex ante tool, and one dealing with foreign procurement. We're not really going to be looking at the foreign procurement proposal today in the interest of time, as Claire said, and Victoria has just mentioned. We don't really have time to go through all of the proposals, but there's plenty to get our teeth into in what are called Module 1 and Module 2. And Module 1 is the general scrutiny proposal, an ex post proposal, if you like, in which the Commission or any other type of institution, because it's not really clear yet which it might be, the supervisory authority, would have the ability to consider whether foreign subsidies are unfairly benefiting or having a distortive impact on the EU single market. And there could be some sort of regressive payments or behavioural remedies if the Commission or whichever supervisory authority found that there were. And that would be balanced with a consideration of the benefits of the subsidy, so that there would be a balancing act in the investigation which might find that the foreign subsidy actually on balance is a good thing. Module 2 is a slightly more specific proposal, an ex ante notification proposal, under which foreign subsidies which are being used to facilitate the acquisition of EU companies come under scrutiny. And under this module, companies which are intending to use some form of foreign investment in their acquisition would be required to notify to, and in this case, the Commission has actually proposed that it should be the supervisory authority. And that would then trigger an investigation of whether or not the investment was distortive and lead to various different potential remedies there. There is, as I said, a third module dealing with public procurement, and in the interest of time, we're not going to dwell on that module today. But what we are going to do is consider a little bit why the Commission has put this proposal forward. We're then going to consider a little bit the difference between the ex ante and ex post procedures and what impact these could have on companies which are seeking to invest in Europe. We're then going to go on a little to discuss the procedure of investigation which is proposed. And then finally, we'll come on to look very briefly at the remedies. So without further ado, perhaps I could hand over to Claire to launch us into the sort of the first debate about why.
Well, that's the big question. So why these proposals and why now? And so I think to start with, if you go back to the white paper, if you've read the white paper, you can see that the Commission has identified a regulatory gap that's not covered by any other regulation or legislation, like trade defence measures, antitrust, merger regulations, state aid rules. And they've identified that there is a potential for distortion of competition in the EU single market from foreign subsidies. And we'll go on, and Eddie and Francois will talk a little bit more about what that might cover and might mean, and how that might be defined. But this has an impact on the single market, and in particular, this proposal is linked to the Commission's industrial strategy going forward for the green and digital transformation of Europe. And so the question that I think we might need to also ask is, well, which industries are likely to be most affected by this? Is it goods or services? Is it does it make any difference where the foreign subsidy might be coming from, what companies it might be coming from? And I think also we might need to ask the question of which companies are likely to be targeted by this, and how the impact it's likely to have not only on those third countries who might be trying to do business in Europe, but also on European businesses themselves. So quite a lot to cover in the debate. So I'll hand over now.
Thank you for those questions, Claire. And of course, also thank you to Conv and PAR for giving me this opportunity to enter into a discussion with all of you, and Francois in particular, on the white paper that indeed, as Jeremy said, we have put into the world mid-June for public consultation. The objective of the white paper, why are we now coming out with the white paper? Well, look at the title and there you have it. It's all about leveling the playing field. Once you are operating in the European internal market, it should be on similar conditions for everyone. So I'd like to underline yet again that this is not about scaring away foreign investment. That would be foolish. Foreign investment is responsible for a big part of growth in Europe. It is responsible for over 16 million jobs in Europe. So why would the European Commission come out with a suggestion that would scare away foreign investment? No, not at all. But what we are aiming at, you're very welcome, anyone, to do business in Europe. But when you do so, then it should be under the same rules as anybody else in the single market. If you come here to do business in the European Union and you're violating our antitrust rules, we can go after you. That is what the antitrust rules are allowing the Commission to do. The same for the merger rules. But when you're getting foreign subsidies, then there is no way for the Commission to intervene. When you're getting state aid from a member state, yes, but not when you're getting the same aid from another jurisdiction. And that is leading to unfair situations. It means that companies with foreign subsidization could enter into a business practice, could try to acquire a company in Europe, could also bid in a public procurement context, and have that advantage because of foreign subsidies. That is what we want to do away with, distortive effects of foreign subsidization. And we cannot deal with that under our current rules. As you said, Claire, the antitrust rules, the merger rules, the state aid rules, the public procurement rules, the FDI rules, the trade defense rules. We cannot, for the moment, intervene in that respect. Little footnote, when it comes to the import, the subsidized import of goods, we can under our trade defense instruments. So that is why the subsidized import of goods is excluded from the scope of the white paper. For the rest, we're looking at all types of services, all types of goods, all types of industries, and all companies, European and foreign alike. We're not targeting foreign undertakings. We're targeting distortive foreign subsidies, even if those foreign subsidies are being granted to European companies. So it has indeed a wide scope, but it is focusing on those distortive foreign subsidies that are unleveling the playing field today in acquisitions, in public procurement, in subsidizing activities of undertakings already present in the EU. And that we would like to do away with.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Eddy. Francois, from your position as a practitioner in Asia, give us some thoughts as to how this is received by you and what perception you have of it as a proposal.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you to all of you to join. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that the intention of the Commission is, as Eddy has said, is not to prevent foreign investment. I think that's the intention, but the problem I have is that I personally believe that the actual objective of the white paper and the future regulation is either too broad or not defined enough. And therefore, anything that we will be putting in place will have a chilling effect on foreign investment. Not only because we don't know what we really want to protect, but also because we have other instruments and because simply it will, and I will explain this in the course of today, that will be seriously, essentially preventing a normal flow of deals and commercial relationship between companies. So let me be a bit more specific. So we say we want to protect distortion. Of what? So I've looked at it. I think there is 160 or something reference to distortion in the white paper. I understand that the distortion can be the distortion to the EU market. Not clear what it is. A distortion to the general market operation of economic operators. Again, we don't know what it is. Or a distortion of the valuation of assets. So those distortions are very complicated simply because they're not defined, and frankly, I don't understand what that may mean. Then the other thing, what we're saying is that we want to make sure that we have a level playing field. Fine, but not all companies are the same. And companies that would benefit from a foreign subsidy, I think it would be a bit simplistic to believe that just because they receive this kind of subsidy is free to do anything that they want. They don't have any obligation, and they're just there to invade the EU market. Companies who receive foreign subsidies and support are have definitely their own obligations. So they also have the issues. And so if you want to make a level playing field, well, we also have to consider their own position. So we don't know, or at least I don't know what distortion may mean, and we don't know what level playing field be. Then we have specific examples in the papers, but then unfortunately, examples be bought. So overall, I'm not convinced that with a non-clear objective, what we will put in here in place will not have a serious chilling effect on foreign investment.
Okay, well, I think that we'll be able to come on and allow Eddie the opportunity to address some of those issues as we go into the weeds a little bit more. But perhaps now we could look a little bit at the key differences between the two modules that we're looking at in terms of their ex ante and ex post approaches. And just ask a little bit what's the thinking behind those two different approaches and the impact that there is likely to be on business wanting to invest. The other thing is that the EC suggestion in the proposal is for the ex ante screening to remain within the Commission. That's module 2. But for the ex post, there is no clear proposal as to where that scrutiny should lie. So whether it should be within competition authorities or within government ministries. And I just wanted to ask what the potential options are there also, and what the maybe what the drawbacks and benefits of those different options might be. Eddie, perhaps we could start with you on that.
Thank you, Jeremy. Indeed, let me start by focusing first on Module 2. Module 2, as you say, is addressing mainly acquisitions that have been facilitated by foreign subsidies. If Francois is asking what is so distortive about it, well, I think that I have a number of cases in my head where I know that it is because of foreign subsidization that someone got finally the acquisition rather than another company that could not profit from that foreign subsidization. So there was not really an acquisition on the basis of the merit. It was on the basis of the money that you were putting on the table thanks to the foreign subsidization. Could we stop that on the merger control? No, we can't. Even if it is a critical asset, can we stop it under FDI? No, we can't. Because the FDI regulation is saying that only subsidies that lead to a control by a foreign government could be stopped. Well, that's quite a threshold. There is still a gap that we are convinced about, and therefore we are suggesting in Module 2 that there is, for all those who received foreign subsidies that would facilitate an acquisition, that they inform us about that. If you have the courage to look at the white paper, it tells you that there is a very short sheet of information required for companies that got some foreign financial contribution. The kind of questions that we are asking in the white paper for this first level ex-ante control in case of acquisitions is something that you should be able to do on the day itself. I assume that companies have an insight into their financing model. So probably do, what is your financing model? Who is it that is subsidizing you? That is the first phase that we have in Module 2, the ex-ante compulsory notification, which doesn't really add any red tape for foreign companies because of its limited nature. It is only when the supervisory authority gets worried about this foreign subsidization that we may go into a phase 2. And that is not going to take place in all cases, obviously. Phase 1, the Module 1 is of a general nature. That's an exposed and ex officio system. That is one where we find that there has been a distortive effect by foreign subsidization on the market. There was an aid, for example, to an ailing company without a restructuring plan. Aid that would be prohibited in the European Union, but that through foreign subsidies can come in. and therefore distort the level playing field on our internal market. That is worrying us. That is what we, under an exposed ex officio regime under Module 1, could deal with. So an ex ante for acquisitions and for public procurement, but that we're not dealing with, and an exposed ex officio under Module 1, where the supervisory authority would come in and deal with the distortions. Now, who is this supervisory authority, you're asking, Jeremy? We are suggesting for both that it could be the Commission and a national authority. It's true, on Module 2, we have a preference for the Commission to deal with this, because we assume that if it is dealt with at a centralized level, these information sheets can be processed more quickly, because that is exactly what we are looking at, that this additional control is not blocking acquisitions or the timing of it, but at a centralized level you could quickly go through it. But the white paper is putting that as an option. Comments on that are very welcome. Whereas for Module 1, we are being inspired by the division of competences, or the division of work rather, as we have it in antitrust, the division of labor between national authorities and the European Commission, where there would be also an interaction between the national authorities and the Commission, where there is a possibility for the European Commission to intervene if that would be in the EU interest. So more of a shared competence between national authorities and the European Commission for this ex-post, ex-officio regime of Module 1, the more general market control.
Okay, thanks, Eddie, for that. Francois, from a corporate perspective or acting for parties who are investing, what does all of this mean in terms of ex-ante, ex-post review? How would that impact on you advising or recommending things for clients?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'll start with Module 1. So the way I see it from a practical perspective is, to me, this is like being constantly under surveillance. Because when you look at the criteria, really, if yourself or anyone in your group have received a foreign subsidy, which currently actually or potentially may have that distortion effect, whatever it means, then at any point in time, an investigation can be launched. About what? About, if I have understood correctly, about a subsidy that you or in your related company may have received for 10 years or 10 years ago, right? And then not only that, but a redressive measure can be imposed on that, somehow retroactively, I assume, if I guess, again, I understood correctly. So I think that what seems simple is actually pretty chilling again, because that essentially means, if I understand well how it will work, that essentially means that anyone which has an establishment in Europe or even just doing business into Europe and will have those subsidies may at any point in time be in an investigation. Now, when will this happen? Why today? Or maybe tomorrow, or maybe in 5 years from now? So can you imagine for a company how you can, this kind of threat that you may be under, not only because you say, okay, you will be under investigation, and that's my practitioner's view, being under investigation is not on its own nice. But there are sanctions at the end of this, right? So this is a serious, very serious instrument, actually. So I believe that there is a real risk here that just that fact of being under surveillance for 10 years back could be seriously problematic. And then for the Model 2, the ex-ante review, so there's a bit of the guardian mechanisms, if you want. That concerns any potential acquisition of material influence over target that do generate, as of now, significant turnover, or may potentially in the future generate a significant turnover in Europe. Now, this is very, very broad. If that happened, you have to decide to go to the authority and to make that notification. So assuming that you can make and connect the dot and indeed make the assessment that it's distorting, so you have to come up. And if you don't, the entire deal may be at risk. And for a seller, which we haven't talked about so far, which I believe indeed is looking for one thing, essentially, is money. So if a seller has that risk, so I'm afraid that we will be here in a situation where foreign investment will not continue to pitch. Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Francois. Well, it's clear that there is going to be quite a big impact from a practitioner perspective, but maybe we could go into a bit more detail on the actual investigation process prefigured in the proposals. So I think in both Module 1 and Module 2, there is envisaged a two-step process for investigating, firstly, whether there is a subsidy at all and whether that subsidy distorts competition. And that obviously begs the question of what sort of how long that process of investigation might be, and whether there is any clarity on what sort of tests might be established to determine whether or not benefits counterweigh alleged distortion of the single market. And are there any existing models that we could look to for guidance on that? Within the two different modules, there is obviously or not complaint investigation, but could the supervising authority also be responding to complaints? And on Module 2, there is a whole host of questions about how this investigation process would tally with the existing merger review process for competition. Could these run in parallel with each other? And could they be linked, for example, to existing FDI screening regulation review? So, Francois, perhaps we could start with you on this issue of the length of the proceeding.
Yeah, I don't think I will be able to address all the questions you just asked, but yes, the length of the proceeding, I don't know, but I guess it will be long. And the reason why I believe that is by making a parallel with the EU anti-subsidy regulations that we have. So this regulation, which essentially allows the European Union and in fact all the WTO members at the same kind of regulation to impose customs duties on exports of products which have been or which have benefited from subsidies and therefore allegedly which are sold at a lower price in Europe. Now, those cases are very long. They are very long and they should be very long because identifying what a subsidy is a complex matter, let alone the question of whether it distorts competition or distorts the market, which, again, I'm not sure what it is supposed to be. But the concept of a subsidy is something that cannot be lightly defined or decided. In fact, I believe, even a recipient of a subsidy may not well understand what is behind and whether this subsidy and is defined in different manner in the white paper, how it has to define that subsidy. So I think that the phase 1 review, we don't know what the length will be, but the phase 1 review will be long. And will lead easily to phase 2. And that I think can be long. And in fact, if we head to the 12 or 15 months like the EU anti-subsidy proceedings, that may be extremely long and painful for the companies. If that happens, simple. You cannot expect a company doing a deal or making acquisitions to have to involve and to collect all the data about, I think, what they have received or their parent have received elsewhere in the world to convince the commission or the authority that there is no distortion to competition. So I am of the view that that will be particularly complex and therefore long. Then in just your question of how you basically defend yourself. Well, again, this is complex, and noting that, and we'll come to this in a minute, that the authority will be able to base its decision based on so-called facts available. What it really means for a defendant is that you better make your case. And you better be very convincing, because if you don't, then the facts available, what they are in practice, and this is what it is today, is very often the information that has been provided by the complainant, for instance, because yes, I assume there would be a complainant. And so you have the onus somehow is on you to defend yourself, let alone the fact that you probably need to have your own state or the state behind the subsidy to support you, because you may not have the evidence that would be required in that kind of investigation. So I think it will be particularly complex, and we haven't talked about the concept of EU interest, and maybe, I don't know, Jeremy, if I have one 30 seconds to address that. The EU interest is essentially the ability for the authority to, despite the fact that there is some sort of subsidy, to actually decide nonetheless that it's okay, because it's overall in the EU interest to have that, for instance, that deal to proceed. Well, the EU, again, parallel with the EU anti-subsidy regulation, this is extremely complex and very political often, because what the EU interest may be in Germany, in France, in Italy, depending where the target and the sellers are, may be extremely difficult to tackle. So you may end up eventually have very different EU interests, and therefore I don't think that this defense will be sufficiently powerful to really be used, at least in an efficient manner.
Okay, thanks very much. Eddie, I'd like to come to you to discuss a little bit on the investigation process itself, as we were just talking about. And then perhaps after that, I know that some of you have asked some interesting questions. Please do keep coming with those. I'll ask Claire to field a couple of those questions to the speakers too. So Eddie, over to you on the investigation process.
Yes, thank you, Jeremy. And I found common ground with Francois. Francois, you're absolutely right. The WTO procedure is far too long. We can do a separate session with Cambre and Par on why that is the case, but yeah, Victoria is welcoming that. But it is not because we do not know what a subsidy is. We do very well know how to define a subsidy. There is enough case law on that from the WTO panel. So that is not the problem. And I'm agreeing again with Francois that particularly in Module 2, we need to act swiftly. It cannot be that this additional control, which may come indeed, you may have merger, FDI control, and foreign subsidies, that none of these should stop a merger from progressing. That is why in the white paper, when we're referring to the phase 1 and the phase 2, we are talking about working days. We're talking about working days to deal with this. As I said already, phase 1 is a mere information sheet that you should be able to get out of your drawer. That cannot be a difficulty. That we then automatically move into phase 2, I doubt that. And I think that there will be more of a hurdle to cross for the supervisory authority to move to phase 2. But even if you are in phase 2, I agree very much that there should be a swift procedure so that you don't keep the deals on hold. I mean, that is obvious. There may be, to come back to a question you asked, Jeremy, there may be parallel investigation under merger control and under FDI, And I think that we have to find a system, absolutely, where those possibly three are coordinated. Coordinated on substance, coordinated on timing. And that is an important objective for phase 2 of these module 2. Sorry, it's getting a bit complicated. So for the acquisition, if you get into a phase 2 and your deal is on hold for an extra couple of days, there we need to have a coordinated approach in case that would coincide with some merger control or an FDI control. You were asking, Jeremy, whether on module 1 there would be complaints. Obviously, there is a possibility for any market participant to provide us with information on module 1, because that is a delicate point. I think that Francois is hinting at it, to get the relevant information. I mean, we have had cases also on the merger control where you may be asking, did you receive foreign subsidies? And then you may have companies that have received foreign subsidies to simply sit on the information. That is why we are foreseeing indeed in the white paper that there are possibilities for the supervisory authorities to get that information from the companies. And if a company is indeed continuing to sit on the information that it has without rendering it, yeah, then Francois, you cannot blame us for coming out with this facts available. And yes, you will have to make a case. We will have to make a case on the basis of the facts available, but it will not suffice to simply sit on your evidence and wait until the procedure at the supervisory authority level is over. That is why we have the facts available. Last point, again, Francois is right that we have to avoid that there is a huge variety of EU interest interpretation. That is why we have foreseen in the white paper that only the Commission can come up with EU interest, not the national authorities. It would be a privilege of the European Commission to invoke a European interest, precisely as Francois said, to avoid that we have a varied interpretation of this concept.
Interesting on the investigation process there, Eddie. Claire, I think we have a few interesting questions. Maybe you could put one briefly to the speakers before we move on quickly to wrap up on remedies, because that would give us a chance to get through all of the issues we wanted to cover.
I think I might put one from a UK perspective, which has been, there's two actually from a UK perspective, and so one's from George Peretz and one's from Tom Parker, and I might put the two together. There are some other questions which deal more specifically with the analogy between EU state aid, case law and practice, and how this one will mirror or not those sort of things. And I think I might leave those until a bit later on if we still have time. But from a UK perspective, he says it's fair to read the white paper as a way in which the EU can put pressure on its close trading partners to operate their own anti-subsidy regime, particularly if the EU's remedy for foreign subsidies is to take that subsidy away from the beneficiary and hand it to the EU. A result that's tougher on the subsidising state than is the EU's own state aid regime. That's the first question. And then second one from Tom Parker says, how would these instruments dovetail with the EU Code of Conduct on for business taxation in non-cooperative jurisdictions, for example? So can we take those two?
Yeah, perhaps Eddie, maybe you could start, and Francois, you get your thoughts on those.
Yeah, thanks, Claire, and those who asked the questions. Since we have published the white paper, I'm reading left and right that we are targeting a particular country. But depending on which publication I'm reading, it's a different country that we are apparently targeting. Let me ease your mind on this. We are targeting all non-EU foreign subsidization. So it's not targeted at any particular country nearby or far away. It's all foreign subsidization that could be distorted in the internal market. And you're raising an interesting question there as to how this relates to our own state aid control and whether we are not going to end up with being tougher on subsidization by a foreign state than by our member states. And that, I think we have to make clear that I cannot imagine that we will be finding a distortion, a distortive effect of foreign subsidization if it is a foreign subsidy that is in line with our state aid regime within the EU. If aid is not distortive in the EU, I think it will be very hard for the supervisory authority to consider that that same aid from a foreign jurisdiction, that would be distortive.
Thanks very much. Francois, can we get your thoughts on that? But perhaps you could also just touch on the remedies which the proposal prefigures, because there is a question mark over how draconian they may be and how long they would go on for. And I know that we're really running out of time now, so it'd be good for you to perhaps comment on that issue of neighbouring countries being pressured by this paper, and then also maybe to quickly discuss remedies as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. So I think this is pretty clear that I agree with Eddie that the paper doesn't target any particular country, but it's just like the EU trade defense, right? You don't target anyone, but for instance, China is 30% plus of the cases on its own. So so obviously there are some countries who will be more affected than others, and this is, I think, what the real question is. I do think that the UK, and we have had cases which were in fact in newspapers with that exact same questions of whether the supports, whatever it means, given in companies in the UK could actually be used and to distort the market in Europe. So I think those questions are valid. I think this is indeed another reason why this white paper is, given the circumstances of the relationship and how tense the international relationships are now, I'm not sure that this is so welcome. Although, again, I understand that's something we may want to do it. We want to do it maybe in a targeted way. And when it comes to that, will be a good transition to the next question about the sanctions. About are we tougher on the third country subsidizing countries? I believe so. I believe so because in Europe, the entire state aid regime is actually clearly tough, but all member states, are supposed to cooperate, and at least you have access to information. At least this is something that is easily accessible by the Commission itself, by the companies. When I say easily, it's probably much easier than it is when it comes to third countries, which have absolutely no obligations to participate. And therefore, just for defending themselves, the companies, which would love to have sometimes information from those countries in order to defend themselves, because this is the level of detail that let's be honest, this is the kind of questions that you will have. Prove to me that what you have received as a subsidy is not under abnormal market conditions. How do you prove that? You receive. How do you prove that what you receive is not in abnormal market conditions? You have to go to your state for that. And if the state doesn't cooperate, you don't have the answer. End of the story. So I think it will be probably tough. Now, pointing to the sanctions. So we have a list of sanctions which are tough enough. But from my perspective, and I'll come to this in a minute, but from my perspective, the simple risk of investigation is already a sanction. When you are just because who you are, one day you could be under investigation because, yes, your parents, or one day, 10 years ago, you have received a subsidy. This is a threat. So to me, I see this as a sanction and surely a chilling effect on foreign investment. The facts available, we have mentioned that. Again, my own experience with those trade remedy cases, that facts available is actually much broader than just we sitting on a fact. Sometimes we don't have the facts. Sometimes we have the facts, but we're not convincing for any kind of reason, and therefore facts available are used. And then we go through the actual sanctions, which are the fines, the periodic penalties, the commitments, divestment, reimbursement of what you or your affiliate companies have received, prohibition of the deal for the Model 2, and in fact a long list of sanctions for not complying with the obligations, including unwinding the deal. So this is so harsh, when you make the list of all those sanctions, that I'm afraid that I understand that it has to be enforced, but I think this is going slightly too far.
Okay, well, look, we really are running out of time now. So, Eddie, perhaps we could just get you to give a quick rejoinder to that before handing back to Victoria to wrap up. So thank you for bearing with us as we just slip over time a little bit. But, Eddie, back over to you now.
Thanks, Jeremy. And indeed, in the interest of time, I'll keep it very short. Yes, Francois, there is a toolbox of remedies available. I think you cannot blame an enforcer for trying to find remedies in order to give teeth to the rules that they want to enact. I mean, otherwise, I think it would be a bit of a game that we are playing, and that we're not into. We're into seriously leveling the playing field, and you may need a whole series of remedies for that. We have, for example, indeed, that the money has to be paid back to the state. Some are telling us already that that is an unrealistic option, but it is an option that you have to have in your toolbox because of the national treatment for state aid, where recovery of the illegal aid is the remedy in the state aid control. All the other remedies, I mean, you refer to the unwinding of the deal. I don't think that there will be any necessity to go into that remedy if you have been in an ex ante system, providing all the information that you had, and you have been cleared. There is no fear of an unwinding of the deal. You're also referring to the possibility for us to 10 years come and haunt you. Well, I think every rule has a limitation period for remedy. That is what we have in antitrust. If we would not have had a limitation period, I think, Francois, you would have quite rightly said, is this forever that you can come and haunt us? Well, no, it's not forever that we can come and impose remedies. So that is why we have a limitation period there of 10 years. The remedies in themselves will be targeted to focus on the distortion as we find it. To have a broad toolbox doesn't mean that you need to use everything in the same case. It just means that you have a variety of tools that you can focus its use depending on the case at hand.
Thanks very much indeed, all of you. And we really have kind of run out of time now, but thank you very much for all of your questions. And we will be endeavoring to kind of follow up with those speakers so that you get some more substantive answers to those questions. So thanks very much indeed. But the consultation lasts until September, and doubtless we'll be looking at this issue again in due course. And let me quickly hand over to Victoria to say thanks and farewell.
Swiftly, I'd really like to thank all our speakers very much for making this a true debate. So often in Brussels anyway, there is a lot of agreement. So it was quite good. It was very good to see some muscular discussion. Eddie, you were a real sport in explaining the rationale and robustly defending the initiative. And Francois, you were totally bold in bringing your real world corporate experience in testing the wisdom and being frank about what you think is going too far, as you said. Claire's insights were much appreciated, and Jeremy, it was always going to be a tall order, but you almost managed it within the time. So look, I'd also like to in advance thank our speakers for agreeing to a follow-up event when we're back from the summer break. So that's wonderful. Thank you very much. And as Jeremy said, our speakers will endeavour to follow up to the questions. So bye for now, thanks.